Shalom, Israel. It's your brother Marcus G back with yet another Truth for Thought. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High. Second of all, I'm hoping that this is pre-recorded, but I'm hoping that you enjoy your Sabbath. This is a day of rest for us, Israel. So, with that said, I want to get into what this particular Truth for Thought is. And the title is Monkeypox, Coincidence, or was this plague written of? So first, what I like to do is I like to get a background of this disease process as far as the world and their explanation for it. So what I want to do is I want to share my screen. And we're going to get a little background on it. Get it right here. And as you see, the title of this article is Monkeypox cases are spreading. Here's what you need to know. And I'm going to read this whole little article. It's not much at all, but I want to start with, if you look at, and what you see here in the very middle is the diagram of the quote unquote makeup of the actual monkeypox, the actual body of it as it's seen in the microscope, and as far as its, I don't want to use the word genetic makeup, but the actual makeup of it per the world. Now, again, it's per the world. And if you read right here, it says pox virus illustration. Pox virus are oval shaped and have double strand DNA. So there is a genetic makeup, but and the reason I didn't want to say genetic makeup is because it's not one that's of the norm. I mean, because if you go into, let's say the genetics of human, you have so many genes and so many chromosomes and things like that, which elongate the quote unquote genetic makeup of a human. So that's why I don't like to, I can go into it, but I don't like to go into that detailed about something like this, because this is, as you'll see, it's a disease process. It's not something that is meant to just be around. It's something that's meant to die off extremely fast. There are many types of pox viruses, including chickenpox, monkeypox, and smallpox. Smallpox was eradicated in the 1970s. Infection occurs because of contact with contaminated animals or people and results in a rash or small bumps of the skin. And that's in regards to all quote unquote pox disease processes. That's normal. That's the norm normally. The result of what happens when you're contaminated with it. So let's go and start reading about it now. Several confirmed cases of monkeypox have been found in a few European countries. European countries. For those of you that are in the truth, I just did a lesson last Sabbath, and I was reading from the manifesto, and there is this Edomite who basically admits he's an Edomite, but that he is European. So, and let's look at some of these countries: Spain, Italy, Portugal, and Sweden, Canada, the UK, and now in the US. So in this dude's manifesto last week, he referred to God-forsaken Babylon as a European country. I even went as far as to say, well, that's a long way from Europe for it to be a European country. But let me continue on with this. In Massachusetts and in Florida. So in Massachusetts and in Florida, they're now having cases of it. If you've never heard of monkeypox before, it's because it's a very rare disease found primarily in remote parts of Central and Western Africa. Monkeypox cases usually arise when people travel to those areas. But what's different about this outbreak is that these recent cases appear to be spreading among people who didn't travel to Africa. So man's understanding of this disease process, and from this point, I'm going to be referring to it as a plague. Man's understanding of this plague is the only way you get it is if you go to Africa. That's man's understanding. But what they're finding now is it's affecting these people that are contracted in. They've never went to Africa. Again, I'm not going to refer to it as a disease process anymore. I'm going to be using the word plague. There's a reason for that. I'm going to start over with monkeypox. Monkeypox cases usually arise when people travel to those areas. But what's different about this outbreak is that these recent cases appear to be spreading among people who didn't travel to Africa. In a press conference on Monday, May the 23rd, President Joe Biden reassured Americans that we shouldn't be as worried as we were with the pandemic. Now, this is a man that is telling men, don't be worried about this plague, nowhere near as worried as we should have been about the pandemic. I just don't think it rises to the level of the kind of concern that existed with COVID-19, Biden says. That's all in quotes. Should a problem arise, the U.S. has enough smallpox vaccines, which is what's used to prevent monkeypox. Now, for those of you who do not know what a vaccine or an inoculation is, they literally give you what they say is a weakened strand of that disease process. So to prevent monkeypox, they're saying they want to give you smallpox. That is going to help you to prevent monkeypox. Now, with me saying that, I want you to understand there's another inoculation or vaccination that's out there right now and you're going to notice I'm calling it a pestilence and not a plague. Well, I'm referring to this as a possible plague. That particular vaccine or inoculation is just that. They're giving you, if you have never had this particular pestilence before, ever since 2019, you never had it, and you go and you take the vaccination or inoculation for that pestilence, they are literally giving you that pestilence. At that point in time, you can no longer say, I've never had that particular pestilence, because they just gave it to you. But again, I'm not talking about that pestilence. I'm going to talk about this plague. This outbreak is rare and unusual, said Dr. Susan Hopkins, Chief Medical Advisor of the UK Health Security Agency, adding that the risk to the general United Kingdom population remains low. People usually catch monkeypox from animals, a bite or scratch. From there, it's possible to pass on the disease to other people through saliva from coughing or via contact with pus from the rashes, lesions, or items such as clothing or bedding that's contaminated with the virus. So I want you to pay close attention to what the description that they have of this. They're saying that it's basically some pus-filled lesions in a rash-like fashion about the skin. You're literally going to see there's a plague that's mentioned in the Bible that meets this criteria way back when. That being said, the infection rate is low, and in most cases, people who get monkeypox don't pass it on to anyone else, according to the WHO, the World Health Organization. There is no evidence to date that person-to-person transmission alone can sustain monkeypox infections in the human population. I want you all to listen to that and really, really think about this. And that's a quote straight from the WHO. There is no evidence to date that person-to-person transmission alone can sustain monkeypox infections in the human population. However, I will tell you, monkeypox is something that can be spread from person to person. In fact, they said just a little earlier, people usually catch monkeypox from animals, a bite or a scratch. From there, it's possible to pass on the disease to other people. That means from person to person through saliva, from coughing, or via contact with pus from the rashes, lesions, or items such as clothing or bedding that's contaminated with the virus. Meaning, if those little pus pockets have burst and you're in the bed and someone else comes and lays in that bed, guess what? You could very well get contaminated. But listen to this next part, especially with the sodomy, the way that it is in the world today. Listen to this. But recent evidence shows a new possible route of transmission. through sexual contact. Although monkeypox is typically not spread through sex, most of the recent cases in the UK involve men who've had sex with other men. These men didn't travel to Africa. Men who had sex with other men. That's why I'm not referring to this as a disease process anymore. I'm going to go by the biblical word of a plague. Let me keep going. And since it can be spread through contact with bodily fluids, Hopkins added, we are particularly urging men who are gay and bisexual to be aware of any unusual rashes or lesions and to contact a sexual health service without delay. But wait a minute, because that's all that I'm going to read of this. I want to go back up and read what the World Health Organization said. And I'm going to actually put my cursor so y'all can read with me. According to the World Health Organization, there is no evidence to date that person-to-person transmission alone can sustain monkeypox infections in the human population. I'm not going to, I've been asked to do a lesson on it about the new legislature that's possibly being put into effect to let these people, the World Health Organization, call the shots medically for God-forsaken Babylon. Right now, it's not something that's really on my spirit to do a lesson about. It's been brought to me. I understand it's been brought to me. But these people who very well might be the standard for where you stay, if you stay in Babylon, if you live in Babylon, and they are saying there is no evidence to date that person-to-person transmission alone can sustain the infection. Yet, not only did they tell you right here how the disease process is contracted from person to person, it also shows this new route, which is person to person. So with that, and I wanted you to really pay attention to this particular part where it says, via contact with pus from the rashes, lesions, or items such as clothing or bedding that's contaminated with the virus, because we're going to look at some pictures of it a little later. All right, but just remember that that was the way that it was worded. Okay, so now, so far what we got, monkeypox is a disease process or plague. I'm saying plague, the world says disease process. Okay, that's fine, the world can do that. I'm saying plague. I'm saying plague for a reason. Monkeypox usually is a quote unquote European deal. It usually resides in the European area. We read the countries. And usually is contracted from Africa. However, these new cases today, these people didn't go to Africa. Now, the World Health Organization says, you know, there's no data to date that shows that it can be spread from man to man and kept up. Not that it can't be spread from man to man, but it can't be spread from man to man and basically kept up on the level of, let's say, this pestilence that's out here. So, and that's what the World Health Organization said. But then they go and say, but there's this new route, and it's through sexual contact, which is from person to contamination from person to person, just totally contradicts. I mean, the World Health Organization's quote sits in between where they tell you how the disease process, how this plague is contracted and spread. And then there's their quote, and then there's this new route where it's contracted and spread from person to person. It's crazy. It's really crazy. It's crafty counsel. Yeah, there's a problem, but there isn't a problem. Yeah, there's a plague, but there isn't a plague. So if you would, please. So now we're going to get into the Bible, okay? We're going to get into the Bible. And, you know, I asked y'all to remember what it looked like. And we're going to look at some pictures of it. But I asked, just remember that it said it's like a rash with pus-filled lesions. So what I want y'all to do is turn with me to Leviticus chapter 13. And we're going to get this whole chapter. And we're going to see, because again, the title is Monkeypox. Coincidence? Or was this plague written of or aforementioned? So I'm going to start with Leviticus 13:1. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising scab or bright spot, and it be in the skin of the flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto one of his sons, the priest. I'm going to read it again, and there's a very, very descriptive, but it gets even more so descriptive the more we go, of this plague. There's a description of this plague. When a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising scab or bright spot, and it be in the flesh of his, and it be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto one of his sons the priest. And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh. And when the hair in the plague is turned white, and the plague in sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy. And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. At this point, I want to stop and I want to go back to that article. And just after I read the quote from the World Health Organization, they said there's a new route of transmission for this. And I told you, Israel, I said, be very, understand that with the amount of sodomy that's going on in the world today, with that, I want to read the back end of this, of verse 3 again. And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. Let's read a little further before I start showing these pictures of the actual, how it looks when you have monkeypox. If the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair therefore be not turned white, then the priest shall shut up him that hath the plague in 7 days. Again, I'm referring to monkeypox as a plague for a reason. It fits the description. But we'll keep reading. And the priest shall look on him the 7th day, and behold, if the plague in his sight be at a stay, and the plague spread not in the skin, then the priest shall shut him up 7 more days. Basically, the priest gonna quarantine the person 7 days. The plague doesn't get worse, but it doesn't get better. He shuts him up. He puts him in quarantine 7 more days. And the priest shall look on him again the 7th day, and behold, if the plague be somewhat dark, and the plague spread not in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is but a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. So why did it say at this particular point, now he can wash his clothes? Now, remember when I was reading the World's article on monkeypox, it said it can be spread through your clothing and your bedding. That's because if those pus pockets rupture, then it can be spread. At the point when, and this is saying in verse 6, at the point when the priest shall look on him again on the 7th day, and behold, if the plague be somewhat dark. So those pus pockets are getting scabbed over, just like it said. And the plague still spread not in the skin, the priest shall now pronounce him clean. It is but a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. So now he can wash his clothes and wash his skin thoroughly. Verse 7, but if the scab spread much abroad the skin, after that he hath been seen of the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen of the priest again. So what he's saying is, after that 14th day, because he did 7 days, the priest looked at him. It didn't get better. It didn't get worse. It's still white. It's still what the world calls, it's at a head. Those pus pockets, those lesions are still at a head. So he gets quarantined the second 7 days. That second, now, this is saying that it didn't scab over. So it started spreading after that 14th day. Okay. And if the priests see that, behold, the scab spreadeth in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprosy. Not it is leprosy. It is a leprosy, meaning a type of leprosy. Again, from this point, from the point that I said it, monkeypox is a plague. But I'm going to keep going. When the plague of leprosy is in a man, then he shall be brought unto the priest, and the priest shall see him, and behold, if the rising be white in the skin, and it have turned the hair white, and there be quick raw flesh in the rising, it is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh. It's even going to let you, it's going into enough depth to let you know if it's a new case, or what in the medical field we call acute, or if it's an old case, or what we call chronic. Verse 11, I'll read verse 11 again. It is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean and shall not shut him up, for he is unclean. So this is a man who has an old leprosy. This is not an acute case. This is a chronic case. This man's been shut up before. He's been quarantined before. He's been quarantined for at least 14 days before. This is just an unclean man. Verse 12, and if a leprosy break out abroad in the skin, and the leprosy cover over all the skin of him that hath the plague, from his head even to his foot, wheresoever the priest looketh, then the priest shall consider, and behold, if the leprosy have covered all his flesh, he shall pronounce him clean that hath the plague. It is all turned white. He is clean. But when raw flesh appeareth in him, it shall be unclean. So what it's saying is, when you start seeing those lesions, those pus pockets, but then where a pus pocket was, you actually see what looked like meat, up to and including the white meat, quote unquote, the white meat. Oh, this is an unclean man. See, if it was just all the pus pockets, that's different than the pus pockets, but the plague is taking effect so much that some of those pus pockets are now flesh, like eating like holes and lesions into the skin of actual flesh. I'm like seeing pink. I'm seeing white. I'm seeing muscle strands, things like that. This is an unclean man. Verse 15, and the priest shall see the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean. It is again, it's not saying it is leprosy. It is a leprosy, a plague, a type of plague. Or if the raw flesh turn again and be changed unto white, he shall come unto the priest, and the priest shall see him, and behold, if the plague be turned into white. So let's say the same man, he had pus pockets, then 4 or 5 of them turn into raw flesh. You can see into his flesh, but then it got covered up with the pus again. It's been engulfed in a pus pocket again. Let's see what this means. Then the priest shall pronounce him clean that hath the plague. So it's saying he's clean, but he has the plague. He is clean. The flesh also is when even in the skin thereof was a boil and is healed. Why would they bring up boils? Again, this is in the Bible. This was written so long before the WHO was even thought of, before that article was even thought of. But let's keep going. And in the place of the boil, there be a white rising or a bright spot, white and somewhat reddish, and it be shewed to the priest. And if when the priest seeth it, behold, it be in sight lower than the skin, and the hair therefore be turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague of leprosy, broken out of the boil. So what he's saying is, you got these pus pockets. One has ruptured and you see the pus there, but it's mended itself. You know how a pus pocket can, like, you can break it and it'll mend itself. And now he has just pus lying on his skin. When the priest sees it, he's unclean. It is a plague of leprosy broken out of the boil. So they're referring to the pus pockets as boils. They're referring to the fluid, or what we know as pus, as white. They're referring to the actual skin of the pus pocket. They're saying it can be red sometimes from the irritation. It can. But they're saying these are plagues and of a type of leprosy. This is a plague. Keep going. But if the priest look on it and behold, there be no white hairs therein, and it be not lower than the skin. And when they say lower than the skin, those are the lesions I'm talking about, where it's actually eating into your skin, kind of like acid. But be somewhat dark, the priest shall shut him up 7 days. So he's gonna go in quarantine for 7 days. Now, this is a man that had this plague, but one of his pus pockets burst, healed itself, but the pus was literally laying on his skin. It didn't eat down, that pus didn't eat down into his skin. The priest is now putting him into quarantine. Verse 22, and if it spread much abroad the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague. But if the bright spot stay in his place and spread not, it is a burning boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. So way back then, this was how priests did what is today known as a field diagnosis. Well, if it does this, then this. Same type of if-then statements that you can find if you're going before a board today to test for any medical certs. So way back then, Israel, we were doing field diagnoses. We were doing things that they do today, and they give it this. But you notice it don't call it field diagnosis. That's man's term for exactly what Aaron and his sons were doing, the priests were doing. So I was at verse 23. But if the bright spot stay in its place and spread not, it is a burning boil. So that's not diagnosing him with the plague or a plague of leprosy, but it's diagnosing him with a burning boil. And the priest shall now pronounce him to be clean. Or if there be any flesh in the skin whereof there is a hot burning, meaning like inflammation, and the quick flesh that burneth have a bright spot, somewhat reddish, further showing that which the world knows today as inflammation or white, then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the hair in the bright spot be turned white, and it be in sight deeper than the skin, it is a leprosy broken out of the burning or the burning boil, wherefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague of leprosy. But I want you all to keep in mind the different descriptions, whether it's deemed clean, unclean, whether it's deemed a leprosy, a burning boil. Look at the descriptions of these plagues and keep them in mind. Verse 26, but if the priest look on it and behold, there be no white hair in the bright spot, and it be no lower than the other skin, but be somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. He's going to put him in quarantine another 7 days. And the priest shall look upon him the 7th day, and if it be spread much abroad the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He's not getting better. It is a plague of leprosy. The priest is saying, Aaron or his sons are saying, he's not getting better. This plague is taking a hold on him now. And this again was after the 7 days of being quarantined. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague of leprosy. Okay. Verse 28. Now, this is again after that first 7 days of quarantine. And if the bright spots stay in his place and spread not in the skin, but it be somewhat dark, it is a rising of the burning, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. And it's still going to look kind of irritated, but it's darkening up. It's not looking as pus-filled. The priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is, look at this, an inflammation of the burning, or of that boil that was referred to as a burning boil. It's an inflammation of the burning, or the burning boil. Crazy. It's right. Our people knew about inflammation way back then. But let me keep going. Verse 29, if a man or woman have a plague upon the head, meaning in his hair, or the beard, places where hair covers. Listen to this. Then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in sight deeper than the skin, and there be in it a yellow thin hair, meaning it's filled with yellow, then the priest shall pronounce him or her unclean. It is a dry scab, even a leprosy upon the head or the beard. And if the priest shall look on the plague of the scab, and behold, it be not in sight deeper than the skin, and that there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall shut him up, that hath the plague of the scab 7 days. So just to kind of give for in today's time, let's say there's a person who has monkeypox and it's in the hair or a man's beard. That's kind of what this is referring to, like having the same rash and boil looking, pus-filled boil looking skin, but it's in your hair or in your beard, the hairs of your beard or the hairs of your face. Verse 32, and in the 7th day, The priest shall look on the plague. It's still being referred to as a plague. If the scale spread not, and there be in it no yellow hair, meaning it's not filled with yellow anymore, and the scale be not in sight deeper than the skin, so it's not lesions into the skin. Listen to verse 33. He shall be shaven, but the scale not shaven, meaning shave around the affected area. Shave the hair around it. So if there's a pus pocket here, you shave around it, the hair around it, okay? He shall be shaven, but the scale shall he not shave, and the priest shall shut him up that hath the scale for 7 more days. So even after shaving his hair around, and it's shaving his head around the scale, he still goes in quarantine for 7 more days. And in the 7th day, the priest shall look on the scale, and behold, if the scale be not spread, and he'll be able to see very clearly, because remember, he shaved around where the original scale were. So he'll be able to see if it's spread or not. If the scale be not spread in the skin, nor be in sight deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. The whole time, our people understood that their clothing, you can contract it from their clothing. Let them keep that clothing on until they are pronounced clean. If they just so happen to be in their bed when the priest comes and sees them, that's where they're going to be quarantined. They stay in that bed. Those sheets don't get washed. The clothes they had on don't get washed until they're pronounced clean. Verse 35, but if the scale spread much in the skin after the cleansing, after they've shaved the hair or the beard, and is spreading much. Verse 36, then the priest shall look on him, and behold, if the scale be spread in the skin, the priest shall not seek for yellow hair. He's unclean. It don't even have to turn, that pus don't have to turn back to that yellow. He's unclean. It's just, that's the diagnosis. Now, when you look at, and I want to kind of touch on that, in the medical field, when it comes to infection, there are different colors. You have white, you have yellow, you have like a gray, you have a green. What those show, per the world, is the age of said infection. How long a person has had this infection in them, excuse me. So in this case, the infection doesn't even have to show that it's getting older, because turning from white to yellow shows older. He is unclean. Verse 37, but if the scale be in his sight at a stay, it didn't move, it didn't go anywhere, it's still in that same spot, and there is black hair grown up therein, the scale is healed. He is clean. So what it's saying, it went from white, it didn't turn yellow, went from white to it's darkening up, almost looking like a scab. The scale is healed, he is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. If a man, also a woman, have in the skin of their flesh bright spots, even white bright spots. It's another description Then the priest shall look, and behold, if the bright spots in the skin of the flesh be darkish white, because you do have an opaque like white, then you have this you have a thin, translucent, and a real thick white, milky white. Listen to this. Then the priest shall look, and behold, if the bright spots in the skin of their flesh be darkish white, it is a freckled spot that groweth in the skin, he is clean. And the man whose hair is fallen off his head, he is bald, yet is he clean. It's saying he's bald, but he's also clean. And he that hath his hair fallen off from the part of his head towards his face, he is forehead bald, yet is he clean. And if there be in the bald head or bald forehead a white reddish sore, it is a leprosy sprung up in his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall look upon it. And behold, if the rising of the sore be white reddish in his bald head or in his bald forehead, as the leprosy appeareth in the skin of the flesh. Verse 44, he is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head. The best disease process I can give you of something like this will be, and this is something has been coming out lately. There's a meningitis, a meningococcal that's out. That is an infection of the brain. Like this says, the infection is in his head. But he also has one spot out here. But the infection is literally inside of his skull. And that is something that is happening right now. Meningitis is very real right now. There is a meningitis going on right now. It says, he is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head. And the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent and his head bare, and he shall put a covering upon his upper lip and shall cry, unclean, unclean. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone. Without the camp shall his habitation be. Meningitis is extremely contagious. This sounds to me like meningitis, what you know today as meningitis. They will quarantine a meningitis case, I promise you, just like this. Just like this. But this is in the Bible from way back when. This was written way before I started getting into medicine. I've been into medicine ever since I was 11 years old in the 6th grade. I was working in a cath lab. I was putting pigtail wires in people with a balloon on the end, opening up arteries at 11 years old in the 6th grade. But this was written way before then. This was written way before then. Let me keep going, because I got to get to these pictures of this monkeypox. And I want y'all to tell me, does this look like a type of leprosy or a plague? When I get to that point. So, verse 47, the garment also that the plague of leprosy is in, whether it be a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it be in the wrap or woof of linen or of woolen, whether in a skin or anything made of skin, and if the plague be greenish or red, remember I told you it's different colors when you're dealing with infection. Greenish or reddish, meaning something has ruptured and it's left a green stain or even a reddish stain. In the medical field today, there will be a pus-filled enclosure with blood in it. It's blood and pus filled. But the plague, and if the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment, meaning it's stained red or it's stained green in the garment or in the skin, either in the wrap or in the woof or in anything of skin, it is a plague of leprosy, and shall be shewed unto the priest. And the priest shall look upon the plague and shut up it that hath the plague for 7 days. Israel, I know y'all heard me say this a lot, this truth for thought. Is it ironic that 7 is the number of days? 7 is the number for completion with the Most High. The Sabbath or 7th day is the day to rest. That's when he completed his work. It is a holy convocated day, but is there irony there? Let me keep going. Sometimes things like that, while I'm reading the Bible, they just pop up in my head. And I have to ask. It's not to me. But I just had to ask. Verse 51, and he shall look on the plague of on the 7th day, if the plague be spread in the garment, meaning if he's still exhibiting spotting in his garment from that which was on or in his skin, either in the wrap or in the woof or in a skin or in any work that is made of skin, the plague is a fretting leprosy, a different kind of leprosy. It is unclean. And I'm trying to think of something that would be considered biblically a fretting leprosy. And it's on the tip of my tongue. It's when you have lesions and their blood filled. They have some pus in it, but they're blood filled and they pop really, really easily. Really easily. You can just barely, say you putting a shirt on and just the friction from pulling the shirt over, it'll pop. It is a type of fretting. It is a fretting leprosy. It is a type of leprosy. It was written about in the Bible a long time ago. It is also unclean, per verse 51. Verse 52, he shall therefore burn that garment. Why? Because those types of plagues, or as the world call them today, disease processes, are extremely contagious. That's why they burn them. He shall therefore burn that garment, whether wrap or woof, in woolen or in linen, or anything of skin wherein the plague is, for it is, it's declaring it again, it's giving the field diagnosis again, for it is a fretting leprosy. It shall be burnt in the fire. And if the priest shall look and behold the plague be not spread in the garment, either in the wrap or in the woof or in anything of skin, meaning after that 7 days, okay, we're not seeing any green or any red in his garments anymore. Let's keep going. Then the priest shall, verse 54, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is. Meaning, okay, it looks like it's gone. Let's wash your garment, wash your skin, and shut him up 7 more days. We finna see. Now we finna see if you're truly clean again, or if you're still unclean, meaning infected. And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed, and behold, if the plague have not changed his color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. Thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is fret inward. This is what we tend to say in the medical field as septic. This person is septic. It's in the bloodstream. Whether it be bare within or without. And if the priest look and behold, the plague be somewhat dark after the washing of it, then he shall rend it out of the garment, or out of the skin, or out of the wrap, or out of the woof. And if it appear still in the garment, either in the wrap or in the woof or in anything of skin, it is a spreading plague. Thou shalt burn that wherein the plague is with fire. And the garment, either warp or woof, or whatsoever thing of skin it be, which thou shalt wash, if the plague be departed from them, then it shall be washed the second time and shall be clean. Verse 59, Israel. This is the law of the plague of leprosy. In a garment of wool, woolen or linen, either in the wrap or woof or anything of skins, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean. Israel, what I just read to you was what is known as medical direction in today's terms. And what medical direction is it says, remember that when I said these if-then statements, it says, if I as a paramedic pull up to a lady and she says, I just don't feel good. And you say, well, what do you mean you just don't feel good? And she just keeps saying, I just don't feel good. Medical direction says, I need to put her on a monitor. She might be having a heart attack. And the way medical direction work is, if the woman complains of this, then do this. Again, if then statement. That's as a paramedic. And I use that example because women present with an MI much different than men. They can just say, I just don't feel good. A man will tell you, I feel like an elephant is sitting on my chest. And they both can be having the same widowmaker, which is one of the worst type of heart attacks you can have. And it's based on that particular, where the blood flow is being cut off, what particular part of the heart it is. And that cuts off one of the biggest parts of the heart. And it hurts. The heart lets you know, I am starving for oxygen. But what this is medical direction for Israel. Now, again, going back to the title, the title of this Truth for Thought was Monkeypox. Coincidence or just a disease process? Or was this plague written of? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my screen again because I want you to see some pictures. All right. So I'm pulling the pictures up right now. Now I'm going to share my screen so you can see them. And I want you to tell me, Israel, what do you see? Now, the world calls this monkeypox. As you can clearly see, when it says the hair is white within that lesion, this is white, but it also talks of some that are dark. And per the medical direction, there's a way to deal with this person who has a type of leprosy that is a plague. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this next one. I want you to look around his hair. You see it's in his hair? They can't shave per the Bible. He have to be quarantined or shut up for 7 days. It has to not spread any worse than it is before they'll even shave around the spots here in his head. But this is monkeypox. Is this a plague that was written of? Look at another picture. Let's see. Let's just see. I just want to see. Here we go. Classic. This is what the medical field would say. This is a classic. Classic. All the signs and symptoms. And a priest, Aaron or his sons, will look at this and say, this is a classic. It's got all the signs and symptoms of a leprosy, a plague. That's exactly what our forefathers would have said. Let's look at one more. Look at one more. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. This is what the world calls monkeypox. Look at this spot right here. That's his belly button, but you see how it's into the skin? You can see the pink of his skin right there next to where this little hand is. That's where one of the lesions has burst, but it's going into the skin. This was talked about in the Bible. This was directly addressed in the medical direction of the Bible in regards to this type of leprosy. this plague, this type of plague. So Israel, the reason I did this is because I've been talked to by a lot of people. Man, why don't you use your medical expertise? I am a retired paramedic and respiratory therapist, registered respiratory therapist. I turned down medical school. And this is so crazy. I turned it down based on racially charged questioning. I blew the MCAT out the water. They still want me to practice medicine in the Western Hemisphere. Bad. But I will not. I will utilize my knowledge to help my people, though. I do that all the time. But I want Israel, I've asked before, you got your eyes open? Do you have your eyes open? And this just so happened to be something that I do well as far as with the medical field. This is happening right now today. In fact, they found out sodomy helps to transmit it. I just did a lesson maybe a month ago entitled Sodomy Equals Death. And lo and behold, here we go. Another plague that is spread through sodomy. So with that, Israel, I hope y'all learned some things. Like I said, when I read Leviticus 13, that to me is definitely medical direction for how to treat plagues, certain plagues. And those are different plagues that are talked about there. But believe it or not, there are real, quote unquote, disease processes today that fit those plagues. There are. Now, did you notice anywhere in the medical direction for the treatment of those plagues where it said anything about an inoculation or vaccine? Yet these people, they were still living. Just a little truth for thought for you, Israel. With that, I bid you, Shalom. It's your brother Marcus G. Be it the Most High will. Until next time, love you, Israel. I look forward to seeing you next Sabbath. Shalom.